Good evening or good morning, wherever you are in the world. I'm Tan Xiaojun and I'm moderating the fourth YouTube session of the 11th fall edition of our Read for Pixels campaign. Through Read for Pixels, the Pixel Project is collaborating with 17 award-winning best-selling authors to raise awareness about violence against women and to raise funds for the Pixel Project to keep our efforts to end violence against women alive and kicking. We'll be telling you more about the Read for Pixels fundraiser, which has lots and lots of exclusive author goodies a little later in this session. And you can find out more about the Pixel Project by visiting www.thepixelproject.net. We have a very special guest for today's live Read for Pixels discussion and Q&A session, the acclaimed historical, contemporary, and fantastical fiction author and poet Chitra Banerjee Divakaruni. Welcome to Read for Pixels, Chitra.
Hi, it's my pleasure to be here today.
Lovely to have you here. Now, as you all may know, Chitra is an award-winning author, poet, activist, and teacher. She has published 23 books, including The Mistress of Spices, The Palace of Illusions, The Forest of Enchantments, The Last Queen, and her latest novel, Independence, which won an American Book Award in 2024. Her work has been translated into 30 languages, as well as made into films, plays, and dance dramas, and even an opera. She is the McDavid Professor in the internationally acclaimed Creative Writing Program at the University of Houston in the United States, and also an activist in the areas of education and domestic violence. She serves on the advisory boards of the non-profits Maitri, which she co-founded, and Daya, which both help South Asian survivors of domestic abuse and trafficking in San Francisco and Houston, respectively. Aside from being with us here today, Chitra and her publisher William Morrow have joined forces to generously donate some awesome goodies to the stash of author goodies we have up as perks for donors at the Read for Pixels Rally Up fundraising page. This is Chitra Banerjee Divakaruni's Independence Bundle. If you're a big fan of feminist history fiction, there you go, centered around women's lives and an avid book collector, you'll be thrilled to know that Chitra and William Morrow are giving away 3 collectible bundles to Read for Pixels donors in the US. This bundle includes 1 hardcover edition of Independence, as Chitra is kindly showing, as well as 1 signed and personalized book plate by Chitra. Now, if you're new to her thought-provoking and immersive historical novels, this is a great way to get started with reading her books while donating to support the cause to end violence against women and girls. It also makes a wonderful gift for a friend who is a feminist book collector or who loves outstanding feminist historical fiction that showcase wonderfully well-rounded and believable female characters. Remember, there are only 3 of this exclusive bundle available, and it's first come, first serve. So do make a donation to snag it as a treat for yourself or a friend before someone else does. And just a reminder, these bundles are available to donors in the US only. We have raised $1,775 towards our $5,000 goal so far, so please do help us keep the momentum going before the fundraiser ends next month in October. All funds go towards the Pixel Project's work to help end violence against women. If you're watching this session on YouTube right now, you will also be able to ask Chitra questions live. Just make sure you're logged into your YouTube account so that you can type your questions into the chat box to the right of the YouTube screen, and Regina, who is today's producer and chat box moderator, will relay them to me to read out to Chitra to answer. And now, over to Chitra. What will you be reading for us today?
I'll be reading a portion from this book, Independence, to give people a sneak peek into this story. This is a story set in 1946 and onwards, so in the 1940s in India. And this is the time when India is struggling very hard to gain its independence from the British. This story will focus on 3 women. They are 3 sisters, and they go through this turbulent, exciting, but also violent independence time, this period where they have to learn what does it mean for a country to become independent and what does it mean for its women to become independent. So the title Independence really relates to these 2 very different and yet interconnected levels of independence. I'm going to read to you from early on in the book. The girls have come to the city of Kolkata, where their father owns a free clinic, a free medical clinic, because And on this particular day, a big riot takes place in Kolkata. So Hindus and Muslims are fighting against each other. There's a lot of violence, there's a lot of bloodshed, and parts of the city are being set on fire.
Okay.
The
So,
girls and their mother, they
mm,
hear from a friend that their father has been injured. He had gone to his his place of work, his clinic, to help people who were wounded or injured. And in the process, he got himself injured. He was hit by a bullet, and now he's in a critical condition. And the girls and their mother decide they must go and see him. So,
okay. I will give you.
yes, I'm going to read now. This is from a portion where they're leaving their home and entering a dangerous street in Kolkata. There's rioting going on everywhere. They are Hindus. They are going to pass through a Muslim part of the city where they could be attacked just for being of a different religion. So they have been given burqas to wear. So they're covered up in these burqas, and the story is being told by the point of view of the youngest sister, Priya. Now they hurry down the alley, 6 of them stepping shadow to shadow, startling at every sound. Raza, who has come to help them, in front, Amit, who is their host, behind, and the women huddled in the center, the mother and the 3 sisters. Raza had bought a skull cap for Amit, and for the women, burqas that belonged to Nurse Salima. They will be safer this way because they are crossing a Muslim neighborhood. Priya's burqa smells of clove and garlic. Through its net veil, the world shimmers, unreal. Deepa supports their mother, Beena. Jamini clutches Priya's hand damply. Priya hears Beena whisper. She's telling their father, Nabakumar, to hold on until they arrive. They have reached the street where the clinic is located, the last, most dangerous stretch. They will have to cross a major thoroughfare, many street lamps, no opportunity to shelter in shadows. There has been some heavy fighting here recently. Priya sees bodies spread eagled on the ground. Some have fallen into the drains that line the road. She doubles over, retching. Hindu or Muslim, in death there is no difference. The slaughter here is deeply dreadful. Only Beena remains fixed on her goal. Hissing at them to be silent, she picks up her pace, giving them no option but to run after her. Lucky that the rioting has moved away, else no burqa could have saved them. Even as Priya thinks this, a group of men comes around the corner. Seeing Beena's small party, they begin to run toward them with frenzied yells. Their leader wields a sword. His forehead is streaked with vermilion. It is a Hindu mob. The girls are frozen. Then Beena, how is she able to think so calmly, so clearly, removes her burqa and drops it to the ground. She orders her daughters to do the same. She pulls the caps off of Raza's and Amit's heads and throws them down. Then she joins her palms and speaks loudly, addressing the leader. Dada, Goddess Kali must have sent you. My children and I are trying to get to my husband, a doctor who was badly wounded, trying to save lives tonight. He is in the clinic down the road. Will you help us get there? The leader is taken aback. One of his men points to the burqas and whispers. Beena says, we were scared to come through the Muslim neighborhood, so we disguised ourselves. But see, we are Hindu. She looks the leader in the face and holds up her hands. The leader notes the marriage sindoor, crimson on the parting of Beena's hair, the iron and conch shell bangles on her arms. Finally, he says, very well, I will take you to the clinic. but do not venture out again. The next group you meet might not be so kind. At last, the clinic entrance. The mob melts into the night. Raja knocks on the door and calls to his uncle. Is he thinking the same thing that keeps running through Priya's head? If the mob had realized he was Muslim, he would not be standing here now. The rest of them might be dead too. The door opens. Hurry, hurry. Just before she ducks inside, Priya looks up. The sky is a dull red. Calcutta is burning. And this is a completely true historical account. My own mother, who lived through the period of independence as well as, all of its ups and downs, remembers being in Kolkata on that night, seeing the riot and looking at the sky and seeing a completely red sky because the city was burning. And this passage is always a powerful one for me when I read it, because it shows a couple of different things. It shows how people can turn on each other, how there's so many kinds of violence that just seem to flare up because of the differences we see between each other, but also how no matter what kind of violence it is, the women are always hurt in a special and terrible way. The women have a lot of things to fear when it's a situation like this. So this is from a portion of Independence. These three sisters will go on to find strength in themselves, to find their own independence, and to go through tragedies and wonderful high points in their lives that will make them strong, that will change them totally. That's it from my end. If you have questions. Hi, I'm not hearing anything from my end. I'm hoping you can hear me.
Can you hear me?
Now I can. I couldn't hear anything in between.
Okay. Hi, everybody. This is Regina Yao. I'm the founder and president of the Pixel Project. And I'm here taking Xiaoqin's place temporarily because apparently we're having sound issues.
Hi, sorry everyone. Can you hear me clearly now?
Yes, I can hear you now.
Okay, I'm so sorry for that, Regina. Thank you for coming in. I think I should be able to take over now. Apologies to everybody for my technical issues earlier.
Okay, no problem. So, I hope everyone could hear my reading.
Yes, your reading was perfectly clear. Okay, so we will put you back on screen, and both of us will disappear, and I will start asking you the questions now.
All right.
I'm sorry. I think my audio just doesn't like me disappearing off the screen. It went off because I went off.
I'm happy to have you right by me.
Okay, so I will remain on screen and I'll just ask you the questions here.
Yes.
Uh, okay, so as we heard just now, your stories feature plenty of complex and interesting female protagonists like Deepa, Jamini, and Priya from Independence, Sita from the Forest of Enchantments, and Panchali from the Palace of Illusions, which are feminist retellings of the Ramayana and Mahabharata, respectively, and Tilo from the Mistress of Spices, among many others. Who or what are the inspirations for your female characters?
Well, my inspirations come from many places, but I think, I was blessed to grow up with a very strong mother. She was a teacher also. She was involved in India's independence movement. So I think I always had a very strong role model of what can women do, what is possible for them, even in the midst of a difficult world situation or a difficult social situation. So I would say my mother is one of my first inspirations. And she always encouraged me to work as an activist in the field of helping women who are survivors of domestic violence.
Mm. Okay, that's great. Now, historical fiction has its fair share of female stereotypes and tropes, and additionally, writing historical novels comes with certain constraints in terms of staying true to the norms of the period. In addition, your stories focus on Asian female characters, specifically those of Indian heritage, so it's probably not a stretch to deduce that the risk of stereotyping is tripled when time, gender, and race intersect. So, how do you break such stereotypes to create female characters with agency in dealing with the world around them, including situations that involve sexism, misogyny, and violence against women and girls, while also staying true to the time periods of your historical novels?
That is a great question. And the answer is it's not easy, right? Because I have to balance reality with imagination. I have to balance the negative with the positive, and I have to balance women who fail with women who succeed, or women who fail at first until they learn how to succeed. So, all of these are difficult things to balance. I think about them a lot when I'm writing. And I'll tell you about my other historical novel. This is titled The Last Queen. And this a novel I was particularly happy to write because The Last Queen, she is an actual historical character, Maharani Jinda, who was the last and final queen of the Kingdom of Punjab, which was the biggest kingdom in India in the 1800s before the British ultimately managed through treachery to take it over. And so, she had a lot of challenges. She came from a very humble background. She was the daughter of the dog trainer of the palace. But the king
Mm,
saw her and saw her intelligence as well as her beauty. And he was so taken by her character, her characteristics, that he married her. But he then dies, leaving her with a little child. And her story is how she manages in that environment, which was not a very pro women environment. I mean, women were supposed to live in the zanana, in a whole other part of the palace, and make no appearances publicly. And how she maneuvered through that to become a great queen and a great fighter and someone who really battled the British, until the end of her life. So there are women like that. And I think I look for these stories. And then I research into what happened under the surface. What's the private story that led to the public success, acclaim, tragedy, whatever it is. So that's one kind of thing. Now, in Independence, there are both historical characters and fictional characters. The three sisters and their mother, they are fictional characters. But I know they're, because I come from that part of the country and I speak that language, I know how they would have grown up. And, my mother told me a lot about what happened at that time. So I have family stories to fall upon, I have research, and then I have just my own cultural understanding. And I think, again, I'm running, I'm kind of trying to balance on that razor's edge between reality and inspiration because I want the books to be real. But I do want my readers to feel inspired, saying, if these women could go through all of that and survive, then there's a chance for me also. That's kind of how I want my readers to feel.
Okay, that's lovely. And I mean, you don't only write historical novels, you do also have some novels which are set in contemporary times, and these
Yes.
are typically they have protagonists migrating from India to America or who are first generation Indian Americans. So how do you reconcile the different gender and cultural expectations from the modern feminist Western perspective and the traditional patriarchal Indian perspective in these contemporary stories?
Yes, my immigrant stories, yeah, that's a big problem. That's that the characters will face, and sometimes it won't be like men and women battling each other, men against women. Sometimes, as I'm sure you know, the biggest challenges come from other women who are very enmeshed in traditional thinking and who are enmeshed, especially in the thinking that if there's a problem in a woman's life, especially in her family life, well, then it must be her fault. She must be a bad wife or mother or daughter. And that's why it's happening. So the message then from that generation is, come on, do better, clean up your act, put up with this, and just don't make any waves. And then against them, I have often not just necessarily a younger generation, but a forward thinking generation of women who are saying, no, I deserve to live a life of dignity. And that's something I have felt so strongly. I think that has been influenced and really I think, inspired by all the women I have worked with in the field of domestic violence, all the survivors, and that spirit that they have to go on, or that desire they have, which has to be often helped. They need some assistance to make that really a part of themselves. That I deserve better. I deserve to be equal. I deserve a life without abuse.
Mm,
That's been a big inspiration for me in those stories. How to bring that into a realistic context and how to
mm,
show realistic situations that readers will recognize, and not just readers from the Indian American community. I think many women will recognize these situations, certainly many immigrant women, but not even related to that. My readers often come from many, many different backgrounds, and I'm happy to note that quite a few of them, especially in recent years, are men who agree
mm.
with what the stories are telling them.
Yeah. And certainly your female characters, as you mentioned, they are all tough, multifaceted women in their and girls in their own ways who also have their own flaws, as do all people. So when you write your books, do you ever feel pressured by cultural and social expectations to make your female characters relatable and likable?
Well, yes, yes, there's always social pressure, but I think now I've been writing for like 30 plus years, so I don't feel as pressured as when I was a younger writer, when I was like, oh my gosh, am I like a race betrayer? Am I giving away secrets? Everyone thinks we're such a perfect community. Am I like, what am I doing? Am I what
Mm,
I'm saying? Am I becoming the reason for people to feel more racist against my people? That is a
mm,
serious thing, right? That is a serious concern. But then at the end of the day, I felt nobody is perfect. No community is perfect. No community should be expected to be perfect. No woman should be expected to be perfect. These are just human stories. And hopefully, reading these stories, people will understand, both people inside my community and outside, they'll understand us better. And so
yeah.
I think I managed to put aside that worry, though, it keeps coming up from time to time. But finally, as a writer, I feel as long as I'm being true,
Mm,
I'm being as honest and true as I know how to be. As long as, I'm not writing because of an agenda, I'm writing because I want to share the truth of these women's lives with people, then I'm doing okay. And I've
mm,
also come to the conclusion, and I'm at peace with the conclusion that I'm never going to make every reader happy.
Very true, very true. Um, and okay, and your books also depict plenty of complex and interesting relationships between women, including family relationships and female friendships that have camaraderie, complications, and complexity, which feel very real to many female readers. For example, the sibling relationship between Deepa, Jamini, and Priya, and their relationships with their mother Bina in Independence, and the complex mother daughter relationship between Raki and her mother in Queen of Dreams. So, what can you suggest for writers who want to write female conversations and relationships with authenticity?
Well, one of the things I did before I started writing is I would really pay attention to conversations, right? I
Mm,
became very observant and I would listen. And a lot of times when you're in a group, you will hear people talk and you will just learn so much from that. I got so many ideas just from eavesdropping on people's conversations. So I really do recommend this for all writers to place themselves where there's a lot going on and just be be like that fly on the wall, just listening and watching and getting ideas. And
mm,
then we begin to see how do people interact. And our own families are a very good place to do that. And not just, not just present time, but remembering. We do remember a lot about how people treated us. What were the conflicts that we saw? What were the conflicts that we ourselves experienced? What were the things that we wished were different? So we have to go into our own lives, I think, to get a lot
mm.
of our ideas and our scenes. So, you know, uh,
Okay. Yeah, yeah.
watching, listening, taking notes, and being very, very quiet.
Lovely advice. Okay, now let's talk about men. So there are a wide variety of male characters in your books, ranging from the sexist and misogynist to those who respect women as their equals. Do you think that reframing how stories describe men away from hostile and toxic stereotypes and towards complexity and even vulnerability can be one of the ways writers can break away from harmful tropes that promote toxic masculinity and the dehumanization of women in this genre?
I agree with you, although the answer is not very simple.
Hmm.
Yes, if we do this, it will help. But sometimes, depending on especially for historical novels, but also in current times, there are toxic things that go on, and we can't turn away from them either. So we need to show them, but we need to show them in context so that not every male is a toxic male in my books. But are there men who are perpetrating violence on women? There are. It depends on the situation, it depends on their relationship in the story. Again, in Independence, because it is a historical novel, there was a lot of violence against women. When India became divided through partition into India and Pakistan, there was a lot of violence as Muslims moved to Pakistan and Hindus moved to what became the new India. And who do you think suffered most in all of this violence? The women. And this is just a sad historical truth. Women were killed, women were raped. It was a terrible thing. And it would not be right of me to write about partition and independence without showing some of that. So there are scenes of violence against women where women are fighting valiantly against what is going on. But they have to deal with that. And then there are wonderful men in the book who are supporting women. Priya wants to become a doctor. And after her father dies, her father's best friend becomes like a father figure to the family. And he encourages Priya to try and follow her dream. So, I think, and especially as I've matured as a writer, I have felt that I can create this balance more with showing ways in which men are and can be supportive of women. And men of various kinds, men of various ages, men in various relationship situations,
Mhm.
how can they be supportive? That's very important. On the other hand, I do show how men can be negative and violent, and how are women fighting that? Because that's also a skill to be learned.
Yeah. And yeah, to continue on that theme, so books and stories in the historical fiction genre, as you mentioned, usually do involve some kind of violence, including violence against women. And some of your stories do contain implications of rape and domestic abuse. How do you find the balance between showing violence as an integral part of the story and not gratuitously?
I have to show how that violence arose.
Mm-hmm.
And in Independence, for instance, the way it happened is like on the night of the riots, one community starts one fight. And immediately, as a reaction to that, the opposite community starts another fight. So let's say there was a Hindu community that started fighting against a Muslim community, and news of that spread. Immediately, Muslims in another part would say, okay, we have to take revenge. And that starts. So the violence begins to spread. And as it spreads, especially in this kind of riot situation, people just lose all control of themselves. They're no longer thinking. They're like, whoever is in front of me who is not like me, I'm going to hurt them though as much as I can. So, by showing how it happens, I hope I give the historic context, the social context, and I make it believable, and I make it something that, you know, the reader will say, yes, these are the situations in which this happens. And hopefully the reader will think, well, how can I prevent this kind of situation from occurring? How can I create better amity between these different cultural groups, between men and women, between the generations? So that's my hope, that even when we see violence on the page, it does not need to be a negative thing that the reader leaves with, because the violence isn't the end of the story. It's also about the women who rise up after the violence, who say, I will now take charge of my life, who say, I will continue to follow my dream, who continue to fall in love, sometimes with people of, a different religion, people whose community has hurt people of their community, but love can still occur between individuals. And that's what happens in Independence also.
Yes, between Deepa and I forgot the name of the man who becomes her husband, right? That's
Raza,
particular.
Raza.
Yes.
And both of them have to go through a lot of, danger in order
Mm,
to allow their love to flower and to continue, and so that they can get married and live together. They both have to give up a lot.
definitely. Yeah. Do read the book, audience. That was a really good depiction. Now, so how do you think historical fiction authors can tackle the issue of violence against women without falling back on harmful stereotypes and tropes? Like, how do you strive to do that yourself?
Yeah, I try to create characters who are very different from stereotypes. Okay,
Mm,
for instance, we were just talking about Raza. He's a Muslim man, and here we are in a Hindu situation where battles are going on between Hindus and Muslims, and there's a lot of violence. There's a lot of fear of Muslim men among Hindu women. But when we see Raza, we see he's not the kind of person that they think in their minds when they think of a stereotype. And even like the mother of these three girls, she has some really powerful stereotypes in her head because of what happens to her husband. But Raza is kind, he's intelligent, he is thoughtful. He tries to help the sisters as best as he can, even though that means he's kind of getting in trouble with people of his community. And at a certain point, he will hide Deepa, who needs shelter. He will hide her with one of his women friends, a kind of a family friend, and he will provide her with clothing that will allow her to disguise herself as a Muslim. And he's putting himself in great trouble as he's doing this. So I think when we see that there are these men and they are important characters in the book, that helps us to break the stereotypes. And that doesn't in any way reduce the historical accuracy, because always in the midst of people who are being violent, there are other people who are trying to fight against that violence. That's just a fact of life. And they could be male or they could be female. And that's just a fact of life. I like to highlight that, though, in my books.
Mm.
For instance, at this point, white people they often look down on Indians. Historically, at this point, there's a lot of um, backlash. But Deepa, at a certain point, will come to America, and she will come across another man, a doctor, who will be extremely supportive to her, and who will, in fact, fall in love with her and would like her to marry him. So, there's always ways in which I can create a real character who fights that stereotype.
Mm. Yeah, and relating to that, stories can be one of the most powerful ways of bringing about social change because they can help change cultural narratives and perspectives about social issues and traditions. In your opinion, how can authors strike a balance in their storytelling between raising awareness about human rights issues such as violence against women while telling an engaging story without being pedantic or preachy?
That's a great question. I think the way is to, as a reader, I have to immerse myself into the story, and I have to kind of become the characters. So, as I'm writing the story of the three sisters in Independence, when I'm writing Deepa's chapter from her point of view, I kind of become Deepa, right? I have to go deep into her psyche. I have to feel what she's feeling. And then it's no longer stereotypical because it's a real life. And she will have
Mhm.
good moments and bad moments. She will do bad things like, there's going to be a period where she lies to her mother and she goes off to see Raza, and she knows her mother would not like it. And in fact, when her mother finds out, terrible things happen in the family. There's hell to pay, so to speak. But, so she is herself a complex character, and so each of the other sisters. And when I get into their point of view and I'm deep in their lives, then that comes out naturally. And one of the things I think I have learned in my years as an author is there's no character who is completely good and no character who's completely bad. People do good things, they do bad things, but there are facets in each one of us. And I think if I can help point that out, that really prevents my stories from being like didactic or like, here's a lesson you must learn. It's just about all of us living our human lives.
Oh, that's lovely. And do you think it's important for influential authors such as yourself, who are read all over the world, to make a conscious effort to include characters in your stories to show readers the importance of respecting women as equals and as human beings?
Well, I can only speak for myself, but I think, yes, it's very, very important. And that is like probably the most important thing in my writing, to focus on women, to put them center stage, to show them in all their diversity and all their complexity, to show that they have quote unquote good and bad qualities, and that's okay because we are all human and we can admire people even when they are complicated and they do some wrong things. So it's always been my project to put women center stage and give them their own voice. We see the stories, we see the world that they live in through their eyes, not what some man is telling them or what some man is telling us as a reader. So that's why it's very important for me to put the women and to have women protagonists in all my stories, balanced with men characters, because that's the world, right? But
Yes.
the women are always center stage. And I have to confess, my deepest love as an author goes to these women.
Oh, okay. Yes, and like so many of your stories are like lovely to read because precisely because of the fact that you are centering women in all of them.
And if you really look back on the history of literature, in every country, the stories that are told by men are so many. The stories that have been told by women have only started coming up in the last maybe 2 centuries. Before
Mm,
that, even when we saw women in literature, it was always through the male gaze. So I think it's so important now for women authors to write and to put women center stage in their
mm,
books.
definitely. Okay, so I'm going to move on to a slightly more personal question. So, parents are usually the most influential role models in a person's life. As a mother yourself, what do you think parents can do to help prevent violence against women and girls in future generations and to get boys involved in helping to do so?
Well, I'm certainly qualified to answer that question because I have 2 boys. And one of the things that I really wanted to do, because long before I had children, I was strongly involved in activist work in the field of domestic violence. So they grew up seeing me, right? Seeing me doing this all the time. So not only would I talk to them about the importance of women in the world and give them books to read with women characters. I think that's really, really important. Give
Mm,
children books to read where there are girls and women characters that are the heroes of those books. Or at least give them books where boys and girls are heroes together. Then it changes something inside their head. It
mm,
tells them, yeah, men and women are equal, boys and girls are equal, we can be friends, we can work together, we can achieve things together. They are not my competition, they're not my enemy, they're not taking things away from me. Together we can do better. So I think I told them a lot of stories, even like verbal stories. Like before they went to bed, I would tell them stories. We would just all lie in the big bed, and I'd tell them stories, and they always had women characters in them. I just I just felt it was important to do, and I like those stories, so it wasn't difficult. The other thing that I did is, if we came across something, let's say we're watching a TV show together or something, and there was something that was anti women or that was demeaning to women, I would just at least point it out. I didn't make a big lesson out of it, but I would say, look at what this person's saying. Do you think that's correct? Why might it not be right to do this? Or there'd be a sexist joke, and I'd say, hey, let's think about that for a moment. Is that really funny? Think about how hurtful it is to that person. So, in and not like in a preachy way, because then of course children just turn themselves off. But just asking them questions. What do you think? Do you think that's right? Why might it not be right? Do you think that
mm,
person was hurt? How
mm,
do you think someone could have said it better, or maybe not done that, done something else? So, we would often discuss these things. And
mm,
yeah, so I wanted to bring them up with the sense that women should be respected, women should be valued. Look at all the women around us in the world who are doing things. So I'd point to women leaders, I'd point to their own teachers. I would point to people in the family like their grandmas who knew a lot and who loved them so much. And my hope is that that helped. That I
mm,
think did help, because what we learn in childhood stays
mm.
with us, stays with
Yes,
us. A lot of
definitely.
in my work with domestic violence, I see so often that the children of survivors are, if we are not careful, they're just imprinted with that early experience. And especially boys who have come from families where their fathers were violent, that really stays with them unless we discuss it and they get a chance to really see why that's not the best way. Because yeah, we're human beings, we get imprinted with
Yeah, so
things
you really have
early
to
on.
engage with them when they're young, yeah?
Yes, because before, that's the time when we are not thinking logically, we just accept what we are told, and
Mm,
that's a very important stage. So that's what I often tell people who are getting married or planning to have kids. Just be aware of how you're bringing up your children in those early years. You think they're not paying attention, but they're just taking it all in. You
they're
know,
like a sponge absorbing everything.
sponges. So think carefully before you make a sexist joke or a racist joke, or if you expose them to those things, and if you think that's come up in their lives, be sure that you can talk to them about it and they can talk to you about it as well.
Mm, yeah, that's great. That's really lovely advice. So now we're down to our last two questions, which are connected to one another. So you have been so very incredibly supportive of our Read for Pixels campaign and our anti-violence against women work as a whole. So the first one is, why do you support the cause to end violence against women?
You know, I think it's because I was exposed to this early. I was exposed to this in India, where I saw a lot of women who had no agency in their lives or had very little agency in their lives. And they were not everybody. There were also women who were educated and they were doing very well. But we also had a lot of help at home. And many of these women who came to work in our homes, they were not educated. Their husbands did not treat them well. And, I grew up seeing that and it really affected me a lot. And then after I came to the United States, I started working. I was doing my PhD at the University of California in Berkeley, and I joined their Women's Center as a volunteer. And I became aware that women were being treated badly often by their partners, by their, significant others on campus. They were subjected to violence. They're subjected to I don't know, racist remarks or sexist remarks, or sometimes remarks that were both sexist and racist. And I became aware that this was a big problem right here. When I came to the United States, like many, I was very young, I was 19. And like many people, I thought, wow, in this country, everything must be perfect. Women will be treated really well. And I saw, yes, they were to a great extent, but yes, the problems were also there. And I think from that time, I became aware of the problems. And then I just started working after I graduated. I started volunteering with the Peninsula Support Network, uh, and I began to see the same thing, including things in my community that women of my community were very hesitant to come to mainstream organizations. And that was one of the reasons why a group of friends and I, we started My Three in the Bay Area.
Mm. Okay, and so to drill in a bit more about that, more specifically, what do you think authors can do to help with the cultural change needed to eradicate violence against women and girls?
Well, we can do two things, right? The authors, because we, of course, through our books, by presenting, I think by presenting enjoyable women heroines who are strong and who are outspoken and who stand up and fight against um, injustice. We are creating these role models. I think that's very important. And it's so important to do it in a fun way, not in like, I'm teaching you a lesson here. We have to create characters that readers will enjoy and they will identify with. And then something happens magically under the surface when you identify with a character. And a book is such a wonderful way to do this, because when you open a book and you read it and you find a character and you identify it and you kind of love that character, it's a private relationship that you have with that character, and you can really open yourself up and you can really drop your defenses and you can get into that person's life. So I think one of the best things we can do, and in addition to women's issues, I'm also very concerned with issues of racism, and of course sometimes they'll come together. So
Mhm.
to show people of different races in positions where they're sympathetic. They're not perfect. They should not be perfect. They should be human, but they're sympathetic. And as a result, then the reader's drawn into their lives. And that begins to change things in the reader's head. I know this as a reader. I've seen it many times as a writer. And I've seen it many times as a teacher, because I expose my students to stories like this.
Mm. Yeah,
Stories change lives.
indeed, indeed they do. Well, Thank you, Chitra, so much for that excellent session. And thank you to everyone for tuning in. Just a quick reminder, if you joined us late in the session, that Chitra and her publisher William Morrow are kindly giving away 3 collectible bundles to Read for Pixels donors in the US only. And those include, as Chitra is showing us, 1 hardcover edition of Independence, as well as 1 signed and personal bookplate for you, the donor, from Chitra. Now, we also have plenty more goodies available for donors from authors like Angela Yuriko Smith, Premi Mohammed, Eric Nunali, and Rachel Harrison, among others. New goodies will be released every week throughout September. And you can donate to get these goodies on RallyUp at tinyurl.com/R4P RallyUp 2025. Be careful, it is case sensitive here. And if you want to learn more about Read for Pixels, go to bit.ly/Read for Pixels. We've raised $1,775 towards our $5,000 goal so far. So please do help us keep the momentum going before the fundraiser ends next month in October. All funds go towards the Pixel Project's work to help end violence against women. And if you're also interested in feminist and horror poetry, you might want to get your hands on a copy of our award-winning Under Her Eye poetry collection that is published in partnership with Black Spot Books. You can buy either the paperback or ebook edition from all major booksellers worldwide. The collection includes poems by 112 acclaimed female and non-binary poets, opening with Know to Be True by Bram Stoker Awards winner Stephanie M. Wojtowicz, and the writing assignment by HWA Lifetime Achievement Award winner and SFPA Grandmaster Marge Simon, and closing on a powerful note with A Map of the Backyard by Bram Stoker Awards nominee Jessica McHugh. And that proceeds from Under Her Eye go towards keeping the Pixel Project's anti-violence against women work alive and kicking. And finally, to find out more about violence against women and what you can do about it, visit the Pixel Project's website at www.thepixelproject.net. So once again, thank you very much to everyone. Have a good day or good night wherever you are in the world.
Thank you, everyone, for being here and listening. And thank you to this wonderful organization for inviting me to speak.
Thank you, Chitra.